At DEF CON a few weeks ago, I sat down with Codingo, VP of Operations at Bugcrowd, to ask him some questions about report writing, how to write a good report, what to do if you disagree with the priority level given in your report, how request to response works on Bugcrowd, and how to advocate for yourself in a submission. If you're thinking about hacking more on Bugcrowd, or you're just interested in seeing how Bugcrowd works and how it might differ from other platforms, I think this will be a useful introduction to see one of its key differences between itself and some of the other hacking platforms. So let's jump into the interview and listen to report writing explained.
A great hacker needs a great platform, and Bugcrowd is the home of the hacker. They provide hackers with the best opportunities to make money, advance their skills, build community, and unleash ingenuity through their security knowledge platform. They provide distinctive educational content for hackers. You can rapidly pick up new skills through Bugcrowd University or gain practical experience with one of their many monthly challenges. Or maybe you want to follow real hacking experts like myself as we cover methodology, shortcuts, and tools. Bugcrowd has an entire level up series unique to the industry that covers all of that. So if you're interested in joining Bugcrowd, head over to bugcrowd.com/hackers now and join the Bugcrowd community. Thank you very much to Bugcrowd for sponsoring this video.
So we're here at DEF CON,
Yes.
in person, like
Yes.
from literally the other side of the planet.
Quite literally.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's a nightmare
It's
to actually arrange when you have a 12-hour time difference.
Yes.
But it's lovely to see you. Of course, we're all at the Bug Bounty Village. You did a fantastic talk earlier today.
It's phenomenally well executed. The organisers have done a great job.
It's insane. Like, you can look and there's a queue around the corridors.
Absolutely.
And you can really see the Bug
And
Bounty community.
First time village too. So.
First time village is huge. But we're not talking about DEF CON today, we're talking about report writing.
Yes.
I think a lot of people really worry about writing reports and they find it really challenging, mostly because they may not be native English speakers, they may struggle to get the nuances of their findings across, and they may struggle to express themselves in a way that perhaps a customer is expecting them to do.
Yeah.
So let's start out with 5 things that makes a good report.
Yes, first and foremost, professional writing, like having something that's clearly able to be articulated, because it's not just the platform you're speaking to when you write a report. It's very typical that report's going to get circulated in an email or outside of the teams that you're dealing with, because often they're a mouthpiece for their organization. So they're either going to talk to a developer, a board, depending on the severity of the bug. And taking that into any sort of report as making sure you're writing in a clear and concise manner. So the other one is clear reproduction, including all steps of how is this replicated, and that might include screenshots, that might include pathways for this is the kind of account that I'm using, is something that I think a lot of people overlook, and make it as verbose as possible in not only aiding triage, but the replication and the understanding for the customer. And then also take into account not overstating a bug.
Yeah.
If you're putting critical in a title or you're making assumptions in the report that may or may not apply to that organization, you're devaluing how both triage and the customer are going to view you as a hacker.
And it's not going to get your bug really triaged any
Doesn't
faster.
change it. If anything, if you're taking a low issue and you're always putting it as critical, it's less likely we're going to see you as someone serious in the space. And so it's actually less likely that you're going to make your way into priority queues and priority alerting and things like that, which if you're someone that's often bringing a significant impact, you will get different triage treatment, because we know, okay, we get a report from this person, that organization is going to want to know about it quickly.
Yeah.
And that really comes down to accurately reflecting, because all hackers report lows and criticals, making sure that you're accurately reflecting what it is that you're working on.
Yeah, it's that making sure that finding is
Yes.
really accurate.
Yeah, you're essentially writing a business proposal. If this is an impact, this is what you got to do, this is how you reproduce it, and then you get paid for that.
I think that's something that's really important, that you're not necessarily being paid for the bug you find, but the report you write, and you need to make sure that you're spending as much time on that as you are for the actual hacking part.
Yeah, and I think you're getting paid for the business impact at the end of the day. And the other part of that too is, as you're writing, you're not necessarily writing for a technical audience, because you are writing about business impact. So you might be having this report go to someone who's just a manager of a technical team and wants to understand how to circulate it in their team. So also making sure that the approaching and the wording is really oriented around this is how it disrupts your organization from the perspective as I see it.
What do triagers need to do their job effectively? How can you make it as easy as possible for a triager to put it to the customer?
The main one is clear replication, not just doing video, especially too, because the space does get proliferated with fake video.
Yeah, actually, I think that's important to mention that you can't just have a video because people genuinely do fake videos.
Yeah,
and a lot of people think, oh yeah, video shows, and it's a great, it's a good to support, especially if you've got a complex bug, but
it's the other thing to appreciate too is we are already working in segmented environments for triage. When there's a video, we segment again. It actually adds more validation time. To do it in a secure manner, you can't just go and run the video, because then you've got to go and rebuild that VM after that bug. So it is quite counterproductive in some ways to do, whereas screenshots and steps help significantly because you can step through and go through the order of operations. So I think having that in, and also taking into account that how you got to the bug is needing to be clear. It could be that you registered a certain user type, and making sure you mention that, because one of the common hiccups we'll see where things might go back and forth is we've registered one user type, or we've been provided one user type by the customer, and you've registered something entirely different, and if that's not communicated, we may not be able to replicate the bug.
So do you want to just talk through what happens? A triager sees a report, what on earth are they doing next?
Yeah, so in triages get assigned work, so I think there's this false conception that triages are sitting around watching program queues all day, and we do 1 million interactions a year. We can't operate that way. So triager will get assigned work. They've got usually some level of experience on that program, notes for that program, those categories and things like that. First thing they're going to do is they're going to look at notes for the program, and then they're going to go through a deduplication process, and the notes often feed into that and infer that. And that deduplication process then, it could be that program, it could be covering 10 other programs that our customer has covered. That sounds more onerous than it is. Technology covers a lot of that. But they're going to first go through and check, is this unique from the first pass? And that really comes into what kind of bug is it? If it's something that is a bit more detailed, the order will change. After that first pass is done, they're going to look at categorization, look at the base impact and make sure that it aligns, which really comes down to what business statement you put in a report, and go through the steps of replication. And with the steps of replication, then it's also segmented again, so it's making sure we're in a separate machine to what the actual bug description and such is, and go through and reproduce that.
What should you do? What happens in that process if you maybe don't write a good report? What then ends up happening on the triage side?
Yeah, it gets challenging. We rewrite it in many cases. So it does mean, means for the customer, we're going to have to convey on your behalf, and it adds a lot of overhead. But it also means that it's a more extended process of understanding it, to a degree of accuracy. Is this a duplicate? Is this a duplicate in impact? And does this matter? Your first impression when you get a very succinct report is that the person's inexperienced, so it does discolor how you look at it. And unfortunately, you still have to approach things objectively, but it does make it harder if when you're looking at many reports, you see a high degree of professionalism on one side and then someone that's just doing a very succinct or poorly toned report.
How does Bugcrowd support hackers who maybe don't have English as a first language, or maybe they're beginners just starting out and they just don't know how to write a better report?
Yeah, we invested pretty heavily in this. So we hired a pen test report writer to work full-time for a year, making templates for every VRT category. So today, when you pick a VRT category, two things happen. First, it'll populate a template for you to work from, which helps give you an understanding of structure and the writing tone that's involved. And the other is there'll be a box on the left with expectations for some categories. If you're doing a subdomain takeover, it'll tell you put a hash of your username on the page. So there's guidance on the left and then a framework to work from. And that framework really does feed back into the kind of reporting that most customers expect, because most customers have worked with pen testing in some capacity before they get to bug bounty. So we've tried and fit that kind of structure to give them a common language.
What are some common reasons that triagers might set a bug as NA before it even goes to the customer?
A lack of impact. If it's something that's speculative, I believe I can. It's at its very core, you need to answer the question, as a hacker, I can, and that answer should satisfy a business impact, something that's going to impact the customer.
Yeah.
If it's, as a hacker, I can set my own screen to blue, and you can't impact anyone else. Even if there's a technical bug involved in that, it's not going to have a business impact that would warrant a fix. So that would be something that would go NA.
And I think the important thing to recognize is also the reverse. A non-technical bug that may be working as intended can be a vulnerability simply because it lets you do something that causes a business impact.
Exactly. And I think it's really just explaining that in a way that conveys risk.
So let's flip it over. So what happens when a triager says triages the vulnerability, sends to a customer, and a customer marks it as NA? What are some of the reasons that happens?
Yeah, but it comes back to business impact again. It can be, we try and delineate accepted business risk from no business risk with the informational category. And so it doesn't always flow that way because we've got so much diversity with thousands of customers now. That's tens of thousands of users because every customer has multiple users. So some inevitably might choose NA over different categories. And so that's one reason. The other could be that they've looked at it and it's a false positive, or it could be for their product something that just doesn't have a risk, where us and the hacker might see this looks like it's got business risk. They then look into it and they're able to provide an adequate explanation of why it doesn't, because they've got more context than the other parties have.
If that happens, how can you flag, oh, this is NA and it shouldn't have been NA? How do you flag that on Bugcrowd?
So on Bugcrowd, there's two processes there. The first being request a response. So you can raise a request a response, it'll go to a senior person to review it. The other is you can open an appeal. After you've gone through the request a response process, you'll see a raise an appeal button if you still feel that you'd like to advocate to another team. That'll go to the appeals team, or you can email support to open an appeal. And that goes through a process of then the appeals team will coordinate with customer and look into it. It really does need to have new substance. If you raise a request a response and the team's giving you a pretty suitable explanation that the appeals team agrees with, then that isn't going to progress. But if it does look like there is a reason to escalate further, then they'll go and they'll do.
What kind of advice do you have for hackers who English might not be a first language for them to try and have the same clarity as somebody who might be a native English speaker?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. One is looking at the templates for common language you can take. We've tried to be very cognizant of writing them in a way that doesn't use regional slang or regional constraints, so that it is written in a way that's probably less verbose than a pen test, but easier to replicate forward. And the other is with technology, where it is using technology to assist you, just to make sure that you've got clear and concise language.
Yeah, I think as well, it's just spend that time on it. It is so important to get your point across, because that hacking is great, but if people don't understand what you've done, they just can't have that conversation with you. What should you do on a submission if, say, you've tried to speak to the triager or you've tried to speak to the customer and you just cannot express yourself? What kind of tips might you have for people who maybe are starting the request a response process, or maybe they're just having that dialogue with a customer already in the submission?
Yeah, if you're unsure, that's what support's there for as well. So if you're uncomfortable engaging on the submission in a particular way and you want some assistance, you can reach out to support. And support has more out-of-band communication capability there, where a submission is very much set by responses and ensuring we're equating risk. The support team's there for more of a, hey, look, I need help doing this. I need help understanding this. They can take a bit more time with that in a different engagement type.
If you think about the difference between, say, a customer that, maybe will just accept a report, how much back and forth is there typically in submissions that may not be necessarily negative, may not be like arguing over submission or like priority, for example, but just having a discussion? How often do you see that in reports?
All the time. The part that's fairly unseen is all of the communication that happens outside of the platform. The customer has their own stakeholders to speak to. Often they're a mouthpiece to the organization, and they're going to have to find out who to speak to and who to do business with to get the changes ratified, to also understand the impact of many vulnerabilities. There's also processes where we might need to, in our account teams, follow up a customer or remind a customer of a vulnerability. We proactively have processes, what we call age submissions, where submissions have sat in triage for a while, they haven't moved. That happens outside the platform. So we have account teams that will go and book a call with the customer and help them work through it. And the challenge there essentially is, as much as we'd love to have every interaction in the platform, as a security conscious organization, we can't give everybody access to that queue, and we do need to segment permissions in a way that account teams will work in other systems to forward a bug. And so there is a lot of interaction happening outside each vulnerability that isn't always visible to hackers on the queue.
If you're submitting something like a 0 day where you've got major impact,
Yep.
and that may be across multiple different customers,
Yes.
how does Bugcrowd make sure that things like triages or customers don't end up taking that bug and using it somewhere else?
It's a complicated one with a range of things. One of the best things you can do if you're very confident it's something new, something very impactful, is to reach out to support and say, hey, I'd like to chat to someone senior, and give them some indication of why. It needs to be fairly well justified the first time you engage. If you're someone known to us, that'll happen quite quickly. But then typically it would be connected with someone like myself or another manager in the team to make sure that we're appropriately controlling the visibility of that submission. That might mean that we give you a GPG key and we go through that process to bring it through the queue. Or it might mean that we expedite the triage personally to make sure that it's going to a customer. There's also, obviously, being the organisation we are, a range of controls to ensure that triages aren't submitting bugs that they see, that they don't have the ability to hunt on programs that they triage. And SOC does a lot of proactive addressing of that on the queue, particularly with 0 day, to make sure that anyone who's had visibility, or in general it doesn't spread into other areas before that person's had a point of public disclosure or some sort of referenceable ability for the bug.
I think people worry about that quite a lot, especially when they're writing like really precise reports.
Correct.
But it's rare, right?
It is, yeah. There's been so much care put into it over the years, and for us and other platforms, we have actively removed people from our organisation when they've breached that trust. So if we do get any sort of suggestion, then it is something we do dismiss over to make sure that we hold the trust of the crowd and the trust of customers as much as we can.
How can writing a report get you a better bounty?
Yeah, exploring risk in a way that's properly conveyed helps you self-advocate to customers as much as possible. As much as triage can explain to a customer the impact of something, you're deepest in it when you're exploring it. You're able to really make a strong point of this could affect all customers, or this could cause you a global revenue GDPR fine. Spending time to understand, the external factors that could impact the organisation, advocating for that in the report allows them to really justify to their leadership, the customer's leadership, why something is worth X, Y, Z.
What kind of 3 top tips can you give people who maybe are on Bugcrowd, or maybe just getting started on Bugcrowd, to elevate their reports and actually start to get more critical findings?
Yeah, I think writing a complete report is probably the main one. A lot of people that start out write incomplete reports, and triage does a lot of rating of submissions in the triage process, which equates to invites. You're less likely to get more private invites if you spam low quality reports than if you write a couple of solid ones, even if they're the same vulnerability type. So ensuring that you're writing incomplete instructions, complete business impact, and also a fairly overlooked one quite a lot is writing a good title, like giving something that the customer's going to immediately connect with, because a lot of customers also use webhooks. So they'll have integrations and webhooks, so once something triages, it pops to their Slack, and that's usually just the title. So having a title that properly conveys it and doesn't overstate it, because the last thing you want to do is say, critical this, and it turns out to be a P4 and you've just wasted someone's time on their critical SOC team or something like that. So I think accuracy in statements and complete reports are probably the 2 best things you can do.
A lot of people, when they get first starting out in bug bounty hunting, especially on a new platform, they worry that their report writing may not be good enough. What advice would you give them to maybe looking at their reports they're writing and to help them maybe think about where they can improve?
I think community there, and looking at what others have done, and look at how people like yourself have the content that you've put out and how people talk about vulnerabilities, just getting an understanding of how the community engages as a general, tone and vernacular, and how we convey risk is probably the best way you can improve it. Is you're just going to get exposed to that community and exposed to that group think. It automatically starts to flow in your writing style as well.
I think a lot of people forget that we are a community, and it's not just, and you don't need a formal mentorship to actually benefit from what the community is doing.
Yeah, there's so much out there to view as well. There's information density in this space.
And bug bounty is really taking off.
Yes, yeah, in a big way. It's fascinating.
Thank you so much for sitting with me and chatting today. I really hope that people can look at this video and see how maybe some tips on how they can elevate their own reports, or maybe just enjoy and maybe the kind of subtle, yeah, I'm doing that already. I'm already a pro at report writing. But
Yes.
Thank you very much. It's been
Anytime.
lovely to have you.
Thank you.
And have a great DEF CON.
Thank you very much.